there, the Rogue Wedding Pro here. Thanks for joining me today. If you're a newly engaged couple or parents of a newly engaged couple, you're in the right place, and this should be the very first video you watch before you do anything else in your wedding planning process. If you don't already know who I am, I'm the Rogue Wedding Pro. I'm a 28-year veteran of the wedding industry, and I've decided to go rogue to assist couples and their families navigate through the wedding planning process. Today, we're talking about budgets. Why? I'm glad you asked. It's the most important thing that you need to do when you're newly engaged before you select any vendors, before you set your wedding date, before you make a guest list, before you do any of those things I know you're so anxiously ready to do. This is the conversation that you need to have before any of that other stuff takes place. So let's get started. Pay attention. There's a lot of misinformation swirling around the wedding industry, and newly engaged couples tend to see this information and don't know which direction to turn first. So if you don't have the proper information and know the ins and outs of the wedding industry, you can quickly find yourself down the wrong path. Newly engaged couples are very excited. It's a fun time. There's a lot of blissfulness that comes with it. And all too often, brides are really ready to just pick a date, get it on the calendar, and start telling everyone about that. That can be very tricky and a costly mistake. So I recommend just kind of slowing down after the initial engagement process and just really not rushing into things. The wedding industry does kind of prey on newly engaged couples because this is how it goes. This is the cycle. You're newly engaged, you're excited, there's this blissful period, and then there's this mad dash to get out and do all these things in a big hurry because you don't want to lose a venue to somebody, you don't want to lose a particular photographer to somebody on that particular date. And so that's a big mistake that a lot of people make, and they feel the pressure, and so they book things without really doing their research, without fully understanding the costs, and then they get themselves in trouble later on. The reason why I'm talking about budgets in my very first video is because it's the number one thing that you need to do before you book a single vendor, before you pick your wedding date, before you make a guest list, before you do any of that stuff. Budget conversation is a must do. Now, I know most people don't like talking about money. It can be a very sensitive subject, but it is the number one most important thing you can do when it comes to wedding planning. So many people go into the wedding engagement period thinking it's going to be so much fun and they can't wait. And however, what they soon discover is if they don't have their ducks in a row, that fun quickly turns to some drama, some stress, definitely overspending, and tension. And at the end of the day, more and more couples just wish it was over by that time. So what I'm trying to do is help you understand the process completely and the steps in making that process run smoothly. What I find is a lot of people start to venue shop and pick dates and put their guest list together prior to having a real set budget made. This can really put you in a bind and make things very difficult in the middle of the process if you don't have a concrete budget set and you have already selected a venue and those other vendors and ideas that you have penned and saved and dream about aren't already factored into the budget piece of it. There's a lot of contradicting information in print, online, in the wedding industry when it comes to the average wedding cost. The numbers are all over the map, and too often I see couples who see the average number, say $25,000 for a wedding, and so in their minds they think, wow, that's an affordable, doable thing, so our wedding budget is $25,000. However, what they are not understanding is that the average wedding costs that they're seeing in print and online are not the average weddings that they're seeing in photos on Instagram and on Pinterest. And so the alignment of the budget and the alignment of the ideas that the brides have in their mind do not go hand in hand. So unfortunately, this tends to really cause issues, obviously, when you think $25,000 is going to cover you head to toe in your wedding planning, and you start signing contracts and realize very quickly that $25,000 is barely going to get you dinner. Now, don't get me wrong, $25,000 is a lot of money and can put a very nice wedding together. What we don't understand when we see those numbers is that we don't know the head count that $25,000 wedding had. Was that for 10 people? Was that for 50 people? Was it for 200 people? We don't know. We also don't know anything about what kind of food was served for the wedding. Was there a bar at the wedding? Was it in their backyard? Was it at a venue? What state were these weddings taking place in? Because depending on your region and where you live, you might have some very different numbers. Using the average wedding costs is just a bad idea in general, because there's so many moving pieces and parts that factor into those numbers. Really what needs to be done is an individual budget needs to be created for your particular situation. And that's going to revolve around the style of wedding that you want to have, the approximate number of guests that you plan on having, the region that you're in, if you're in a venue, if you're in a private residence, lots of things are factoring into that. Will there be alcohol at your wedding? What kind of dress are you planning to have? Or do you have a large bridal party? Is transportation going to be needed? Are you having floral centerpieces? So all those factors go into the cost of a budget. And so when you see these average costs, you don't really know what was factored into that. And again, that is why it's very important to put your budget together that specifically is catered to you. And in the next video, I'm actually going to walk you through how to start doing that. And we're going to do vendor by vendor, a true and accurate breakdown of each one of those costs based on pretty much middle America. I'm in Columbus, Ohio, the Midwest, so it's not on the high end, it's not on the low end, I'm in the middle. And so I'm going to help you get accurate to pricing for each and every category. And I'm going to show you 3 different scenarios. So I'm going to show you the low end, the mid-range, and the high end as well. So that way you can sit down in your area and you can pick and choose the things that you want to include in your wedding day, and you can have accurate numbers to base that off of, and then really see where that budget lies and see if it's a doable thing for you, and start making adjustments prior to booking any vendors, because once you do lock yourself into a vendor, you're kind of stuck and you can't really make changes from there. When you're planning a wedding, it's so easy to get caught up in everything that you see on social media. You've got these beautiful pictures, you've got Pinterest where you can see all these things that you want to have at your wedding. There's an overabundance of information and ideas out there, and it does tend to overwhelm many brides and actually makes making decisions a difficult thing to do because there are so many options and ideas floating around. Unfortunately, I've met with quite a few brides who have shared their concern that they feel like their wedding budget isn't what it needs to be in order to give them some of the photos that they're seeing on these sites. And so they feel like their wedding's not going to be good enough, or they can't live up to it, or what you're seeing online. Your wedding day is about you and your partner. And so as long as the two of you are happy and have the things that are important to you at your wedding day and your guests are there sharing that moment with you, that really is the most important thing. So anything less than what you see on social media and comparing to, it doesn't matter. It's about the couple and about the family joining them to celebrate that day. A lot of the stress that goes into the planning process is caused by money. And this is true in everyday life, whether it's a car, whether it's a house, whether it's the wedding, whether it's just vacation. When it comes to money, it can be a very stressful subject. Now, many people are avoiding that conversation because it's obviously usually an uncomfortable situation, especially when you're talking about money to different people. So when you're talking about money with your future spouse, when you're talking about money to your future in-laws, your own parents, those are uncomfortable conversations and people like to avoid them. But we can't do that if you want to have a stress-free wedding planning process. Blending two families can be very tricky. whether or not they have different religious backgrounds, celebrate different traditions, come from different economic backgrounds, or just lived in very different places, such as someone who grew up in a country versus someone who grew up in the city. There's going to be a difference of opinions and abilities when it comes to joining those families together. And so it's a tricky conversation, but it's a very important one to be had going into the process to avoid a lot of the family drama that is going to come as a result of not having that conversation. So in today's planning world, the traditional etiquette of the bride's family hosting the wedding reception, it's still done. It's just not done as readily as it used to be. And so now there's just a whole wide range of different payment contributions going around, whether the couple is fully paying for the wedding themselves or whether both sets of families are making a financial contribution, or grandparents, all sorts of things. There's just a wide range of accommodations nowadays. And so there's no one right way or wrong way to do it. It's a personal conversation that you need to have within your own family. And I'm going to walk you through the steps on how to do that. So if you're the couple and you're footing the entire bill yourselves, then obviously that's a conversation that you need to have between the two of you. Sit down and make a budget and have an understanding on how things are going to be, because obviously it's a very important subject. After your wedding is over, you're about to start your lives together. And so if you can't get through the planning process and the financial pieces of that, it's going to make it very complicated to get through the rest of the financial pieces when you become a couple and have more planning to do down the line, whether it be house, children, cars, colleges, all those sorts of things that come down the line. So it's important to start that conversation off as a couple immediately and prior to, again, making any decisions related to the actual wedding day itself. Families are going to be involved in contributions towards the wedding. It's a must-have conversation in person, in depth, about their contribution amounts, the understandings of that contribution, and to have those conversations again in person. What I do not advise you doing is bringing both sets of families together at the same time to have that conversation. Doing so can unknowingly cause an uncomfortable situation between the families, especially if they do come from different economic backgrounds. When talking to each family independently, what I don't recommend doing is sharing what the opposite family is going to be contributing dollar-wise. It's a private and sensitive conversation between those families. And so when you start talking about specific numbers, that can really put a strain on a relationship if somebody has an inability to match that particular number and feels like they are not contributing the same amount and would like to. And so those conversations are very touchy and can easily be avoided by just stating, you know, my mom and dad are going to pay for flowers or pay for the DJ or the bar or something to that effect without actually putting a final dollar number on that. The best approach that you could possibly have going into the budget conversation with families is just to be absolutely open-minded, appreciative of whatever contribution that the families are able to make, assume none, and be pleasantly surprised with whatever is given to you, which I know not all families are in that scenario. You've maybe got some families who you know all along that parents are going to pay for this or that, but just I like to tell people just go into the mindset expecting nothing and being appreciative of whatever is handed to you. The important part of discussing the budget with the families is not selecting a particular category that the family says that they want to pay for. Now they might say, I want to pay for the bar, or I want to pay for dinner, or I want to pay for the dress or whatnot, which is totally fine to do. However, when you decide to do that, if they decide to do that, what needs to be set is the dollar amount cap. And the reason why I say this is because all too often that conversation is being made way too early in the process to actually know what some of those true expenses are going to be. And so if you haven't selected a venue yet, or you don't know what your bar price is going to look like, and this family says, we're going to cover the bar, well, they might not know what the guest list is at this point, and they also might not have a firm number of what that bar cost looks like. So in their minds, they may think, oh, what could it be? About $2,000. I'm not saying that's what it is. I'm just saying that could be what they're thinking in their mind. What's the worst case? It's a $2,000 bill, and that's affordable to them. And so they say, well, we'll cover the bar. Well, once you set the venue, once you get your guest count and all that information is finally determined, it could turn out to be a $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 bar bill. And when you go back to the family who said they were going to cover the bar, they may be in shock. It may be fine, but they may be in complete shock because they may have been thinking in their mind, oh, well, we didn't think it would be more than $2,000. So now you're putting yourself into a situation where, you committed to this amount because you've signed contracts, but you only have $2,000 to cover it. And so if that family doesn't have the ability to pay more, you now have to figure out how the difference is going to be made up. So that's why when somebody says, I'm going to cover this part or that part, you need to get the hard number on what that coverage looks like. Say that, grandma is contributed and says, I want to pay for the dress. Well, there's a wide range of pricing out there when it comes to dresses, and I always caution brides to stick within their budget when they go try on dresses. Grandma is saying, I want to pay for the dress. You need to get the hard number from grandma on what that looks like, because if grandma is thinking a dress is $500 40 years ago and hasn't seen dress pricing lately, she may be in shock. Also, if grandma says, I have up to $3,000 for a dress, and you pick a dress that's only $1,000 and you find a headpiece and all the other things that need to go along with it for, a total of $1,500, is grandma giving you the difference up to $3,000, or is she simply paying for those items? So when you have that conversation, no matter what the subject is, when it comes to the budget, you need a physical number. You need to understand when they give you that physical number, if I go under that number, can I use the money remaining for other items, or is that it? So that is why it is so utterly important to have that conversation about budget before anything else is done. So a big reason why I tell people not to book any vendors until they have their budget completely set is because the second you book a vendor and you don't have your budget set and you don't know how much you have to spend in that particular category for that vendor, you will surely be over your budget for that category once you determine that. And then from there, what happens is you now have to readjust your budget and either take something away that you really wanted or spend less on something else in order to make that budget balance. And so having a firm budget and knowing every category that you need to cover for your particular wedding, because it's going to be different for each person. Not everyone does everything. You need to know what you have to spend in each category before you book any vendors in that category, because once you sign a contract, you can't cancel. You will lose money. One of the things I like to tell brides to do prior to selecting their venue, prior to setting a date, is to kind of have their ducks all in a row as far as what they envision for their particular day. All brides nowadays have been, on social media, pinning things, have these ideas in their head of what they want things to look like. And so what you really need to put together before you, or while you're putting your budget together, is those things on your list that you just can't do without. There's a lot of things that come along in the process that people start adding that wasn't initially part of the budget, which is a lot of the reason why people go over their budget, because they don't have that stuff figured out going into it, so they don't account for it. So they make all their big vendor purchases and get that all squared away, and then all the small details start coming along, and then suddenly, I have to have this and I have to have that. And it wasn't ever part of the original budget. And so now all that money gets added in and wasn't accounted for. And so your overspending is already there. So as you put your plan together of the must-haves that you want at your wedding day, account for every single thing, okay? Because $10, $50, $100 doesn't seem like a lot of money until you have 1,000 things that cost $10, $50, or $100. It very quickly adds up. And when we talk about budget, putting the budget together in the next video, I'm going to throw some things out there that nobody ever thinks about, that are parts of the fees, credit card fees, things of that nature, that just don't get factored into the budget piece and add up to be thousands upon thousands of dollars at times. So that all needs to be accounted for as well. So we are going to get started here in the next video, really digging into the budget and how to put that together. So right now, you just need to sit down and have this budget conversation with your families, with yourselves, to discuss what is available, what your caps are, what the categories are, and how much of each one of those categories, and fully understand what everything being contributed is, and get those on paper. In the next video, we're going to get down and dirty with the actual budget. I'm going to pull out real hard numbers from real people in the wedding industry for each and every category you could possibly imagine, so that if that category pertains to you, you can pull out that information, apply it to your budget, and be educated on what real costs look like for that particular category and know what to expect. So if you don't already, please make sure that you like, follow, subscribe, all those things that you need to do in order to keep up with my videos, and make sure that your wedding planning process is smooth, stress-free, and drama-free. Make sure you check out my website at therogueweddingpro.com, and I'll see you in the next budget video.